Enigma Renderings, where stories whisper through shadows.
Greetings, listeners of the unseen, and welcome back to Enigma Renderings, where stories whisper through shadows. For those learning English, let this be your companion, where language immerses you through sound, tension, and silence. You're listening to Enigma Renderings, your home for cinematic storytelling in English. Our journey began with a single idea: to breathe new life into timeless tales. Stories that once lived in Bengal, Tamil, Hindi, and many other tongues, carried into English with voice, emotion, and atmosphere. Stories are not bound to language. They travel, they transform, yet their soul remains. Tonight marks another turning point. We step beyond the borders of India and into the dark heart of American Gothic horror. Not a world of distant monsters, but one far closer. A world of guilt, of obsession, of the slow corruption of the human soul. Tonight, we enter the mind of Edgar Allan Poe, a master of psychological horror, a writer who understood that the most terrifying fears are not born in the supernatural, but within ourselves. Tonight's tale is The Black Cat. First published in 1843, this story stands among Poe's most disturbing works, not because of what lurks in the darkness, but because of what speaks calmly, rationally, from the voice of a man who insists he is sane. This is not a story of ghosts. It is a confession. So dim the lights, slow your thoughts, let the world outside fade. Sit back, wear your headphones, and listen closely. And follow the voice into guilt, into madness, into the shadows of Edgar Allan Poe's haunting tale, The Black Cat.
For the most wild, yet most homely narrative I am about to set down, I neither expect nor solicit belief. Mad indeed would I be to expect it, in a case where my very senses reject their own evidence. Yet mad am I not, and very surely I do not dream. Tomorrow I die. Today I would unburden my soul. My purpose is simple: to place before the world, plainly, succinctly, and without comment, a series of mere household events. In their consequences, these events have terrified, have tortured, have destroyed me. I will not attempt to explain them. To me, they have presented little but horror. To many, they will seem less terrible than barocks. Perhaps hereafter, some calmer intellect, more logical, less excitable, may reduce my phantasm to the commonplace and perceive in the circumstances I detail with awe nothing more than an ordinary succession of natural causes and effects. My parents indulged me with a great variety of pets, and with these I spent most of my time. Never was I so happy as when feeding and caressing them. This trait grew with my growth. In manhood, it became one of my principal sources of pleasure. To those who have cherished affection for a faithful and sagacious dog, I need hardly explain the nature or the intensity of such gratification. There is something in the unselfish, self-sacrificing love of a brute which goes directly to the heart of one who has tested the paltry friendship and gossamer fidelity of mere man. I married early and was happy to find in my wife a disposition not uncongenial with my own. Observing my fondness for domestic pets, she lost no opportunity of procuring those of the most agreeable kind. We had birds, goldfish, a fine dog, rabbits, a small monkey, and a cat. This latter was remarkably large and beautiful, entirely black, and sagacious to an astonishing degree. In speaking of his intelligence, my wife, who was not a little tinctured with superstition, often alluded to the ancient notion which regarded all black cats as witches in disguise. Not that she was ever serious upon the point. I mention it only because it happens, just now, to be remembered. Pluto, that was the cat's name, was my favorite pet and playmate. I alone fed him, and he attended me wherever I went about the house. With difficulty could I prevent him from following me through the streets. Our friendship lasted several years. During this time, my general temperament and character, through the instrumentality of the fiend intemperance, underwent a radical alteration for the worse. I grew day by day more moody, more irritable, more regardless of the feelings of others. I used intemperate language to my wife. At length, I even offered her personal violence. My pets felt the change. I neglected them. I ill-used them. For Pluto alone, I retained sufficient regard to restrain me from maltreating him, though I made no scruple of abusing the rabbits, the monkey, or even the dog when by accident or affection they came in my way. But my disease grew upon me, for what disease is like alcohol? And at length even Pluto, now old and peevish, began to feel the effects of my ill temper. One night, returning home much intoxicated from one of my haunts about town, I fancied that the cat avoided my presence. I seized him. In his fright at my violence, he inflicted a slight wound upon my hand with his teeth. The fury of a demon instantly possessed me. I knew myself no longer. My original soul seemed to take flight from my body, and a more than fiendish malevolence, gin-nurtured, thrilled every fibre of my frame. I drew from my waistcoat pocket a penknife, opened it, grasped the poor beast by the throat.
You stupid cat!
And deliberately cut one of its eyes from the socket. I blush. I burn. I shudder while I pen the damnable atrocity. When reason returned with the morning, when I had slept off the fumes of the night's debauch, I experienced a sentiment half of horror, half of remorse for the crime I had committed. It was feeble and equivocal. The soul remained untouched. I plunged again into excess, and soon drowned in wine all memory of the deed. Meanwhile, the cat slowly recovered. The socket of the lost eye presented a frightful appearance, yet he appeared to suffer no pain. He went about the house as usual, but fled in extreme terror at my approach. At first, I was grieved by this dislike from a creature that had once so loved me. Soon that feeling gave place to irritation. Then came, like the herald of my final and irrevocable overthrow, the spirit of perverseness.
Of this spirit, philosophy takes no account. Yet I am not more certain that my soul lives than that perverseness is one of the primitive impulses of the human heart, one of the primary faculties that give direction to the character of man. Who has not 100 times committed a vile or silly action for no other reason than because he knew he should not? Do we not feel a perpetual inclination, against our best judgment, to violate law, merely because we understand it to be such?
This spirit of perverseness came to my final overthrow. It was this unfathomable longing of the soul to vex itself, to offer violence to its own nature, to do wrong for the wrong's sake alone, that urged me to continue, and finally to consummate the injury I had inflicted upon the unoffending brute.
One morning, in cool blood, I slipped a noose about its neck. And hung it from the limb of a tree. Hung it with tears streaming from my eyes and with the bitterest remorse at my heart. Hung it because I knew it had loved me, and because I felt it had given me no cause of offense. Hung it because I knew that in so doing, I committed a sin, a deadly sin, that would so jeopardize my immortal soul as to place it, if such a thing were possible, even beyond the reach of the infinite mercy of the most merciful and most terrible God. On the night of the day on which this cruel deed was done, I was aroused from sleep by the cry of fire. The curtains of my bed were in flames. The whole house was blazing. With great difficulty, my wife, a servant, and myself made our escape from the conflagration. The destruction was complete. My entire worldly wealth was swallowed up. And I resigned myself thenceforward to despair. I am above the weakness of seeking to establish a sequence of cause and effect between the disaster and the atrocity. I am detailing a chain of facts, and I wish not to leave even a possible link imperfect. On the day succeeding the fire, I visited the ruins. The walls, with one exception, had fallen in. This exception was a compartment wall, not very thick,
standing near the middle of the house, against which the head of my bed had rested. The plastering there had, in great measure, resisted the action of the fire, a fact I attributed to its having been recently spread. Around this wall, a dense crowd had gathered. Many were examining a particular portion of it with minute and eager attention. The words strange, singular, and other similar expressions excited my curiosity. I approached and saw, as if graven in bas-relief upon the white surface, the figure of a gigantic cat. The impression was given with an accuracy truly marvelous. There was a rope about the animal's neck. When I first beheld this apparition, for I could scarcely regard it as less, my wonder and my terror were extreme. At length, reflection came to my aid. The cat, I remembered, had been hung in a garden adjacent to the house. Upon the alarm of fire, this garden had been immediately filled by the crowd, by some one of whom the animal must have been cut from the tree and thrown through an open window into my chamber. This was probably done to arouse me from sleep. The falling of other walls had compressed the victim of my cruelty into the substance of the freshly spread plaster, the lime of which, with the flames and the ammonia from the carcass, had accomplished the portraiture as I saw it. Although I thus readily accounted to my reason, if not altogether to my conscience, for the startling fact just detailed, it did not fail to make a deep impression upon my fancy. For months, I could not rid myself of the phantasm of the cat. During this period, there returned into my spirit a half-sentiment that seemed, but was not, remorse. I went so far as to regret the loss of the animal, and to look about me, among the vile haunts I now habitually frequented, for another pet of the same species, and of somewhat similar appearance, with which to supply its place. One night, as I sat half stupefied in a den of more than infamy, my attention was suddenly drawn to a black object reposing upon the head of one of the immense hogsheads of gin or of rum that constituted the chief furniture of the apartment. I had been looking steadily at the top of this hogshead for some minutes, and what now surprised me was that I had not sooner perceived the object. I approached it and touched it with my hand. It was a black cat, a very large one, fully as large as Pluto, and closely resembling him in every respect but one. Pluto had not a white hair upon any portion of his body. This cat had a large, though indefinite, splotch of white, covering nearly the whole region of the breast. Upon my touching him, he immediately arose, purred loudly, rubbed against my hand, and appeared delighted with my notice. This, then, was the very creature I sought. I at once offered to purchase it of the landlord, but the man made no claim to it, knew nothing of it, had never seen it before. I continued my caresses, and when I prepared to go home, the animal showed a disposition to accompany me. I permitted it to do so, occasionally stooping to pat it as I went. When it reached the house, it domesticated itself at once and became immediately a great favorite with my wife. For my own part, I soon found a dislike to it arising within me. This was the reverse of what I had anticipated, yet I know not how or why it was. Its evident fondness for myself disgusted and annoyed me. By slow degrees, these feelings rose into bitterness of hatred. I avoided the creature. A sense of shame and the remembrance of my former deed of cruelty prevented me from physically abusing it. For weeks, I did not strike or violently ill-use it, but gradually, very gradually, I came to look upon it with unutterable loathing and to flee silently from its presence as from the breath of a pestilence. What added, no doubt, to my hatred was the discovery, on the morning after I brought it home, that, like Pluto, it also had been deprived of one of its eyes. This circumstance only endeared it to my wife, who possessed in a high degree that humanity of feeling which had once been my own distinguishing trait and the source of my simplest and purest pleasures.
With my aversion, however, its partiality for me seemed to increase. It followed my footsteps with a pertinacity difficult to comprehend. Whenever I sat, it crouched beneath my chair or sprang upon my knees, covering me with its loathsome caresses. If I rose to walk, it got between my feet and nearly threw me down, or fastened its long, sharp claws in my dress and clambered to my breast. At such times, though I longed to destroy it with a blow, I was withheld, partly by memory of my former crime, but chiefly, let me confess it, by absolute dread of the beast. This dread was not exactly a dread of physical evil, yet I should be at a loss how otherwise to define it. I am almost ashamed to own, yet even in this felon's cell, that the terror and horror the animal inspired had been heightened by one of the merest chimeras it is possible to conceive. My wife had more than once called my attention to the character of the mark of white hair which formed the sole visible difference between this beast and the one I had destroyed. The reader will remember that this mark, though large, had originally been very indefinite, but by slow degrees, nearly imperceptible degrees, which for a long time my reason struggled to reject as fanciful, it had at length assumed a rigorous distinctness of outline. It was now the representation of an object that I shudder to name. For this, above all, I loathed and dreaded the monster, and would have rid myself of it had I dared. It was now the image of a hideous, of a ghastly thing, the gallows. O mournful and terrible engine of horror and of crime, of agony and of death. And now was I indeed wretched beyond the wretchedness of mere humanity, that a brute beast, whose fellow I had contemptuously destroyed, should be made to work out for me, a man fashioned in the image of the high God, so much of insufferable woe. Alas! Neither by day nor by night did I know the blessing of rest.
By day, the creature left me no moment alone. By night, I started hourly from dreams of unutterable fear to find the hot breath of the thing upon my face and its vast weight, an incarnate nightmare I had no power to shake off, pressing eternally upon my heart.
Beneath torments such as these, the feeble remnant of good within me succumbed. Evil thoughts became my sole companions. The darkest and most evil of thoughts. The moodiness of my temper increased into hatred of all things and of all mankind. From sudden, frequent, and ungovernable outbursts of fury, to which I now blindly abandoned myself, my uncomplaining wife, alas, was the most usual and most patient of sufferers.
One day she accompanied me upon some household errand.
into the cellar of the old building which our poverty compelled us to inhabit. The cat followed me down the steep stairs and, nearly throwing me headlong, exasperated me to madness. Uplifting an axe, forgetting in my wrath the childish dread which had hitherto stayed my hand, I aimed a blow at the animal, which would have proved instantly fatal had it descended as I wished. But the blow was arrested by the hand of my wife. Goaded by this interference into a rage more than demoniacal, I withdrew my arm from her grasp and buried the axe in her brain. She fell dead upon the spot without a groan. This hideous murder accomplished, I set myself forthwith, and with entire deliberation, to the task of concealing the body. I knew I could not remove it from the house, by day or by night, without risk of being observed. Many projects entered my mind. I thought of cutting the corpse into fragments and destroying them by fire. I thought of digging a grave in the cellar floor. I deliberated casting it into the well, packing it in a box like merchandise, and hiring a porter to remove it. At last, I resolved upon what I considered a far better expedient. I determined to wall it up in the cellar, as the monks of the Middle Ages are recorded to have walled up their victims. For such a purpose, the cellar was well adapted. Its walls were loosely constructed and had lately been plastered with a rough coat which dampness had prevented from hardening. In one wall was a projection caused by a false chimney, filled up and made to resemble the rest of the cellar. I doubted not that I could displace the bricks, insert the corpse, and wall the hole up again, so that no eye could detect anything suspicious. In this calculation, I was not deceived. With a crowbar, I dislodged the bricks, carefully deposited the body against the inner wall, and propped it there, while I rebuilt the structure as before. Procuring mortar, sand, and hair, I prepared a plaster indistinguishable from the old, and carefully covered the new brickwork. When I had finished, I was satisfied. The wall bore no sign of disturbance. The rubbish was cleared away with the minutest care. I looked around triumphantly and said to myself, "Here, at least, my labor has not been in vain." My next step was to look for the beast that had caused me so much wretchedness, for I was now firmly resolved to put it to death. Had I encountered it then, there could have been no doubt of its fate, but the crafty animal had been alarmed by my former violence and forbore to appear. The deep, the blissful sense of relief which its absence occasioned is impossible to describe. It did not appear during the night, and thus, for the first time since its introduction into the house, I slept soundly and tranquilly. I slept even with the burden of murder upon my soul. The second and third days passed, and still my tormentor came not. Once again, I breathed as a free man. The monster had fled forever. My happiness was supreme. Some few inquiries had been made. They were readily answered. Even a search had been instituted, but nothing was discovered. I looked upon my future felicity as secured.
On the fourth day of the assassination, a party of police came unexpectedly and began a rigorous investigation of the premises. Secure in the inscrutability of my concealment, I felt no embarrassment. I accompanied them willingly. They explored every nook and corner. At length, for the third or fourth time, they descended into the cellar. I did not quiver. My heart beat calmly, like that of one who sleeps in innocence. I walked the cellar from end to end, folded my arms upon my bosom, and roamed easily to and fro. The police were satisfied and prepared to depart. The glee in my heart was too strong to be restrained. I burned to utter but one word of triumph, to render doubly sure their assurance of my guiltlessness. Gentlemen, I delight to have allayed your suspicions. I wish you all health and a little more courtesy. By the by, gentlemen, this is a very well-constructed house. I may say, an excellently well-constructed house. These walls are solidly put together. And here, through the mere frenzy of bravado, I rapped heavily with my cane upon that very portion of the brickwork behind which stood the corpse of the wife of my bosom. But may God shield and deliver me from the fangs of the arch-fiend. No sooner had the reverberations sunk into silence than I was answered by a voice from within the tomb. At first, muffled and broken, like the sobbing of a child. Then quickly swelling into one long, loud, continuous scream. Utterly anomalous. Inhuman. A howl. A wailing shriek, half of horror, half of triumph, such as might arise only from hell itself, conjointly from the throats of the damned in their agony, and of demons that exult in damnation.
Of my own thoughts it is folly to speak.
Swooning, I staggered to the opposite wall. For one instant, the party upon the stairs stood motionless in terror and awe. In the next, a dozen stout arms were tearing at the wall. It fell bodily. The corpse, already decayed and clotted with gore, stood erect before the eyes of the spectators. Upon its head, with red, extended mouth and solitary eye of fire, sat the hideous beast whose craft had seduced me into murder, and whose informing voice had consigned me to the hangman. I had walled the monster up within the tomb.
And so the story ends. Not with redemption, but with exposure. Not with justice, but with the truth that speaks when it is least expected. Because some horrors do not lurk in the dark. They live in the ordinary, in habit, in pride, in the mind that insists it is sane. The Black Cat is not a story of superstition. It is a story of perverseness, of cruelty that begins quietly, of reason used as a shield, of guilt that waits patiently behind the walls we build to hide it. The crime was buried, the silence was perfect, but the voice remained. Because truth does not vanish when we deny it. It endures. It watches. And when summoned by arrogance, it answers.
You have been listening to Enigma Renderings, a place where classic voices return,
Where English is learned through tension and restraint,
and where horror whispers in the calmest of tones. Until next time,
dim the lights, still your thoughts, and listen carefully,
because some confessions are not meant to be heard,
they are meant to be discovered.
Good night from Enigma Renderings.
Where stories whisper through shadows.